Hello, Tungsten Miner here, and I am continuing my exploration of Railcraft today. So let's get into it. Okay, so here I had decided I wanted to try and figure out how to use routing tables to control the movements of trains. So I decided the simplest thing to do would be to just route them based on color. So I've got three engines of different colors, red and black, yellow and black, and blue and black. And it's actually kind of important what that secondary color is because that does come into it. And then I've got here the same setup I've used a couple of other times to keep trains from colliding on that back stretch of trail. So I've got a couple of block signals that go to a receiver. The receiver puts its signals out to controllers, and the controllers control these three receivers right here. And we've got some simple holding tracks to keep the trains while something is occupying that back stretch. Okay, so now let's get to the new part. Here we have got some routing switch activator motors. Very complicated way of saying this is a switch that uses a routing table instead of a redstone signal or something else, just a simple lever, a manual lever, in order to route things around. So you put these routing tables in there, but where did they come from? I'm going to steal this one for a moment here. The recipe for these is just a book and quill with some blue pigment. And when you open them up, you can see I've got a command, in a sense, telling the trains where to go. So I want to flip the switch when the color is equal to red or black. And there's a bunch of help in here that describes all the various conditions and things that you can use. So here I've been using this color equals primary and secondary, tells you what the colors are. But there's also ways to use operators to nest things together. It all works to make a pretty complicated systems that you can write little scripts in here in order to say, do these things or do those things or don't do these things. And they've got a little example back here, and then they tell you exactly what happens when you run that thing. You can also name the books, which is kind of helpful because that shows up in the routing switch itself. So you know which kind of combination of things do you have. So this is my red-black book. So I'm going to toss him back in there. When you're in creative mode, it actually copies the book in there for you. So I'm just going to get rid of that one. And now we've got a routing table book for red-black, and we've got a routing table book for blue-black. It's exactly the same, just blue instead of red. And now when the train of that color comes along, this kind of acts as both a detector and a motor. So it detects that there's a red train coming, detects that a train is coming, which matches the routing table that's in this switch, and it throws the switch so that the train goes in the right direction. The same thing over here. Yellow, not so interesting. But when a blue train comes along, it throws the switch. So that's using a very basic routing table, just a single command based on the color of your engines. Okay, so over here, I wanted to revisit the idea of preventing trains from sharing the same tracks. The thing that I observed in my earlier attempt at this is that you had this one middle piece of track, but it meant that your trains were like really right up against each other. So I wanted to see if I could back them off a bit and say, don't go on this perpendicular section of track nor this parallel section of track when there's something else there. So really what you have to do is combine a couple of different paired sets of block signals in order to do this, because I want to protect this stretch here and I want to protect that stretch there. Now there is such a thing as a signal relay, but that only allows you to make curves and go around things. I couldn't figure out how to make a T kind of intersection using that. So this, I think, is the way to do it. Basically what I've done, let me stick on my Trackman's goggles here and get up where we can take a view, is I've connected the left and right and the top and bottom signals so that they find each other and protect those stretches of track that form that T under the blue lines. Then I've got this signal, which we can see is green, sending itself over to that receiver. And I've got this signal sending its signal down to its aspect, down to this receiver. And then what I really want to do is to say, if either of those says that I should block off the track, then I want to block off the track. So here I'm emitting a redstone signal on either yellow or red. It's not safe to go in there. And here I'm doing the same. I want to emit a redstone signal on either red or yellow aspects. That's going to light up this little bit of redstone dust. Redstone dust comes over to a controller who just says, hey, when I'm not getting a signal, it's good. And when I am getting a signal, I want to go red. And then it sends that red aspect to this receiver, which then, when it gets a green signal, meaning everything's clear, it's going to light up this little bit of holding track, releasing the train that's on top of it. And then the same thing over here. So what we wind up with is anytime a train is entering this T section, it holds other trains from entering that T section. So it's a way of protecting multiple pieces of track that you can't make a single signal blocked segment out of, even using relays. Okay, so now I wanted to expand that concept to say, well, what about big trains? Because one of the problems with using the holding, just the plain holding, which is what this guy is, or the plain locking, yeah, these are plain locking, and then I'm using plain holding elsewhere, is that they will grab onto the second cart and say, oh no, there's somebody in the intersection now, you can't go. And that signal will immediately turn off and it will prevent the train from moving forward. So as soon as the engine nudges into the protected area, it holds the train and keeps it from continuing into the protected area, which is not at all what you want. So I did a little bit of research and reading, and I found that if you use these train locking modes, so let me kind of cycle through again here. Get some reinforced rail, and we're going to get a locking kit. Drop that down, drop the locking kit on top of it, grab myself a crowbar. So now I'm in train lockdown mode. And what train lockdown mode does is whenever it receives a redstone signal, it's going to light up and allow the train to proceed. Doesn't push it, boost it, or anything. Just lets it go if it's going to go on its own. And since it's a train locking signal, and not merely a locking signal, it's going to stay powered for 10 seconds after the last piece of that train is passed. So no matter how long my train is, it's going to notice, oh, keep going, there's more cars in this train. Okay, now the train is gone. The last car has moved off of this little piece of track, and it's going to hold on to that signal for another 10 seconds and then go back to normal. Or it's going to go back to normal as a train approaches. And that's what we're seeing here. This is a short enough span of track where this red train is going to arrive back here before those 10 seconds have elapsed. But just as it gets close, it goes off. And that way it can be sure to prevent a second train from being allowed to go unless it's continued to get a signal. So here we're seeing we've got two pretty long trains, and they're sharing this middle piece of track, and they're sharing this front piece of track. And so as they approach, they get a signal. It's clear to go, if it is clear to go. And it will be momentarily once that train gets out of the way. Okay, clear to go now. So it starts off, and that blocks this signal here. And then as it reaches this intersection, it blocks off this signal here. And this stays blocked until the last cart has gone past, at which point that's not blocked and that's not blocked. And so both of those are no longer transmitting a red or yellow signal to either of these receivers. You can see here that I'm using some gates from Red Power. Just an alternate way of doing things. I figured I'd experiment with that too while I'm at it. So this is an OR gate, which means if this side or that side are lit up, then it will send out a signal from the back end of the little gate here. This is just a bit of red wire. It's a little more convenient. Can climb up walls and around corners and things, which redstone can't do. And then this is just a buffer. So it splits the signal and sends both of them off in opposite directions. So this is now a receiver and a receiver for the two pieces that I'm trying to protect. That goes through this OR gate, that goes through this buffer. Then these controllers just take that signal and beam it along to the receiver there and the receiver over there. So in the end, what we wind up with is anytime a train is in this T-shaped piece of track, it's going to keep any other trains from entering that same T-shaped piece of track. The one other thing to mention is I'm using my newfound knowledge of routing tables to be able to say I want the blue train to go in one direction, I want the red train to go in the opposite direction. Okay, last little device for this time around is I wanted to figure out how to use routing tables to do more than just colors. And in fact, I especially wanted to see how do you set up a series of switches in order to route trains to specific destinations. So all the train has to know is where do you want to get to. Once you know where you want to get to, great. All you have to do now is plug in something to the train and tell it this is your destination. And all of the switches along the way know how to forward you along in the correct directions. So in this setup, I've obviously got 3 different colored trains, and I've set up 3 different colored pieces of wool to represent the routes, the destinations, that I want them to make it to. And then I've gone ahead and I've created routing table books. So in this book, I've got destination is equal to red or destination is equal to blue. If you have multiple lines in your routing table, it's implied that you mean or between the various entries. And so I'm going to drop that book back in there, and that does that automatically in creative mode, so I can get rid of the extra. So now, if a train comes along and its destination flag is red or blue, it's going to throw the switch. But if a train is destination anything else, it's not going to throw the switch. So yellow keeps going straight through. Over here, I've done the same thing, except I've just got red. So I've got destination equals red as the only entry in this routing table, which means if a red train comes along, it's going to throw the switch. Otherwise, it's not going to do anything. It's going to leave it the way it is. So blue train, no change. A red train throws the switch. So at the back, we've got the same kind of lockout mechanism we've been talking about, except I chose to do this one a little differently too. Just keep exploring here. This one's a little simpler in that I've only got this one section of track that I'm trying to protect. So I've got the one receiver. And then instead of doing the kind of configuration where I've got the controllers on all sides, and there's only 4 sides, so you can only do so much. Here, I've decided to use some red wire, and I could extend this, obviously, as far as I wanted to. So here's a case where I've got one receiver controlling as many controllers as I like at the cost of a little bit of extra red wire. Obviously, these 3 are just controlling the receivers holding on these holding stations here, these holding tracks. So what winds up happening is I've marked the destinations of all of these trains somehow, and then these routing switches are able to send them along their way. But how did I mark the destinations? Well, after a little digging around, I found out that you need a golden ticket. And your golden railway ticket, you can say destination equals anything at all, really. Any text, it doesn't matter. You can name things whatever you want to name them. So I just named them red or blue or yellow, and that's where the trains wound up going. So once I've got a railway ticket with the right markings on it, let me just do this, and I'll get myself a locomotive, because I don't want to mess with that system that's already working. I can take my golden railway ticket and pop it in here, and oh, whoops, I deleted the name. So red and done. And then when I stick it in here, it says, okay, red, I get it, that's my destination. And I can take my ticket back again now. So this train, if it were in this system, despite not being a red train, color's not relevant, destination is relevant, has a destination of red. So I could extend this, obviously, quite a lot larger. This is a small example just for the sake of illustration. But clearly, I could have as many of these switches as I want. And the routing tables for some of them would have to be a lot larger, right? If I had this one branch into 2 and this one branch into 2, then this switch would have to account for those as well. So it would have the red and blue, but it would also have whatever the branches were off of that. And that way, you can keep going indefinitely, but you just got to keep updating your routing tables. Fortunately, you can always come here and grab the book out, make changes, and then pop the book back in again. Okay, well, that's it for now. I'm going to carry on with my experimentation, and we'll see what I've figured out for next time. That's it for now. Talk to you later.